she remains tied to community. She remains true to the values and realities of the everyday woman.
All large-scale change is actually just a lot of small-scale change happening.
So to me, feminism is more of a social and political struggle against all forms of patriarchal oppression.
If you constantly find that you are the smartest person in the room, you've completely failed at feminist leadership.
Ignite that sparking others to have a passion for a particular cause.
So feminist leadership, one of the things we need to understand is not just about women playing leadership roles, being women or feminine. It's more of where women lead differently with feminist analysis, values, and ideologies to advance social justice for all.
Welcome to the Lead Like a Feminist podcast. I'm Emily.
And I'm Malene.
Thank you for joining us on our journey to learn from the people using their power to change the status quo.
So as you all know, we've been trying to find our guests by asking you who you know is leading like a feminist. And then we've been making it our responsibility to track them down and try to find out exactly what they're doing that is changing the world around them. So join us and let's change the status quo together.
I wanna be the change. I wanna be the change. Oh, yeah, when I show, yeah.
On this episode, I speak to Julia Lynch, founder and director of the Global Girls Project.
My name is Julia Lynch. I'm the founding director of Global Girl Project. We are an international charity, and we work in partnership with really amazing, innovative organizations throughout the Global South to run one-of-a-kind leadership training for girls within the Global South. And who am I outside of that? I am a boat dweller. So I live on a canal boat. I run the headquarters of Global Girl Project actually out of my boat.
I actually love that. I just feel that needs like a moment of appreciation. The fact that you run this global movement from a canal boat.
Absolutely. You know, we teach our girls that all you really need to do to accomplish what you want is to be determined, and that the rest of it, you know, are just sort of barriers that are perceived and not necessarily real. And so I need to be an example of that. So, you know, we are a lean organization in terms of resource. So, you know, why spend money in places it doesn't need to be spent? So yes, I am sitting in my boat right now. This is where all the magic happens. So it's a big part of who I am. I'm also a capoeira teacher. So I teach Afro-Brazilian martial art, and my best friend is my dog. And other than that, you know, I'm a firm believer that each of us, you know, are here on this earth to create change and to connect with others. And so that's who I am.
And before we go any further, you are going to have to tell me the name of your dog and a little bit about your dog.
Well, so her name is Lua, which means moon in Portuguese. Portuguese because I teach and train capoeira, which is Afro-Brazilian martial arts. So it's done in Portuguese. And it's moon because she was a street dog. So I used to live in Los Angeles. I lived there for 9 years, and she lived with a homeless man. And so she slept under the moon. And so I ended up fostering her, and I decided to choose, as I do with everything else, the most difficult way to foster. So I chose a very, very sick dog who had no fur because she had mange. And she was all emaciated and she smelled awful. And I fostered her, and I then turned into a foster failure because I wouldn't let her go, and I adopted her. And now, that was when she was 5 months old, and she's now almost 9. So She is, a well-traveled, motorcycle riding, boat dwelling street dog.
Wow. But yeah, I wanted to kick us off by asking you something I've been asking everybody, which is just to share something, someone or something that really inspires you with us.
That's a good question. For me, it is, and this may sound corny, but it's very true. For me, it's my girls. And by my girls, I don't mean my biological daughters. I don't have any of those, but I do consider the girls that we work with as my girls and my daughters. And many of them call me mom and auntie and you know, and I am continually blown away at how determined and resilient and resourceful and strong and powerful they are. And so, you know, honestly, every time I see what they're doing with the opportunity that they have with us, you know, I am inspired and it pushes me to keep going. It's the one thing that I always have in my mind that people always go, how do you have so much energy? And it's because I know that this programming, this opportunity needs to get to as many girls in the global South as possible, because they are the ones who, you know, who continue to inspire me and remind me why I'm doing what I'm doing.
So yeah, tell us a bit more about that. What motivated you to set up Global Girl Project? How did it start? Like how was this thing born?
I think it's always an interesting question, because you know, it implies that it was born, but it implies that it was kind of like a singular event. You know, you give birth to a child and ta-da, but we know that for 9 months, there's a lot that percolates. And then we know for the next 18 to however many years, you know, there's that process of becoming. And so, you know, Global Girl started, well, it started actually a long time ago when I had a conversation with somebody who said to me, what is it that you're sitting on and doing absolutely nothing about? What is that project you're sitting on and doing nothing about? And I hadn't vocalized anything about Global Girl to anybody. And so I was quite blown away that this person saw that. But for me, it was like the permission I needed to at least start to dream about it and think about sort of what I could create, you know, and I'm an accidental leader. I'm not somebody who set out to have my own thing. It was really, I am a social worker by training. I work with teenagers my entire career. I had spent a lot of time exploring the world, and in particular felt a draw to different parts of the global South. I'd spent a lot of time within a few different countries in Africa and India and Tibet and Nepal, and really felt a draw there. And I'm also somebody who really has no interest in doing what other people are doing, hence living on a boat, you know, and capoeira and motorcycles and whatever else. And so I wanted to see what wasn't out there, what wasn't happening. And at the time, you know, it was really clear that the opportunity to explore different cultures and languages and religions and different ways of being was a great sort of jump start to help one see themselves differently and to see their strengths and to connect with their strengths and their power. And it had happened for me, and it happens for many people, as we know, in exchange programs. But it wasn't really available for people who were living in poverty within the global South, especially girls. And that was also a time when there was a big focus around girls and leadership. And I could see that within the global South, there was not, and to generalize, obviously, there was not a whole lot that was going on any international scale, conversations happening around leadership and cross-cultural exposure within the global South. So I thought, you know, let's see. And I talked to a number of organizations who worked in exchange, and I talked to them about this idea that I had, and they all were kind of like, well, no, sorry, the girls would have to do our program. And I was like, well, I don't want the girls to do your program because it's based in very colonial ideas of development, which I won't go into now, but a lot of us know what those are. And so I thought, you know, I had met somebody who had started her own charity, and I thought, hey, if she can do it, then why can't I? And, you know, little did I know how hard it would be, but that's where it started. And it started with one girl and then another girl and another, you know, and it's slowly grown over time. But it's been a long process. It's been a long process of giving birth. And I think now she's probably a teenager. Excited for adulthood, but she's probably a teenager now. Yeah, I like it that way.
So yeah, well, tell us a bit more about what you do, how Global Girl Project works. Like what's the kind of bulk of your work and what does it look like?
Yeah, so, you know, first thing that's important to say is that we work in partnership, and that is the key to everything. And what do we mean by partners? We have different types of partners, but our program partners are organizations that are already well established, embedded within the communities that we work. And they are the experts. They're the ones that are already working with girls in their communities, and they know what their communities need. And so all we're doing is we are partnering with them to share resource. We bring resource, they bring resource, and they run the program that we have created. But also within that program, there's a lot of space for them to add what is culturally appropriate and relevant. And then we add the international perspective. So that's how all of our programming, that's the basis of all of our programming. So we have the Blended Learning Leadership Initiative, which is how our girls enter into our work now. It's changed since the pandemic considerably. Obviously, we had to stop doing the exchange program because we couldn't travel. And so we focused on the blended learning. And that's a 3-month program that teaches our girls about voice. What is their voice? How does it sound? What do they want to say? What do they think? How can they use their voice to be able to create change? A lot of our girls don't recognize that they have a voice, right? And so that's kind of the first step. And then, we teach them about different girls and women in different parts of the global South who are doing really cool stuff. And then we also work with them around community, like what makes up a community? What are the parts of their community that they like? What are the parts that they want to change? And then we work with them to identify an issue that they feel needs to be addressed. And that's really important. I'm Canadian. I don't know what needs to be addressed in Haiti or Afghanistan or Peru. And it's not my place, but our girls do. And they know very well, right? And then we work with them to create an event that they run in their community that not only teaches the people who attend about that issue and have conversations about it, but it also provides the opportunity for that ripple effect of change and impact, where our girls are seen as leading, which is often very new in the communities that we're working in. A lot of parents and supporters are like, we've never seen our girls lead before. We didn't know they could. And so it also provides that opportunity for the girls to be role models and leaders. So we're not telling them they can lead. They're going through an experience that shows them that they can. This is run in the local language. It's facilitated by a local woman who runs our program. We deliver it through a learning management system, but it's run in person so that we can work with the most marginalized girls. Our girls don't normally have access to the internet or technology. And so they come in person to be able to access, this curriculum. And then we have an international perspective. So we have girls from different countries who meet each other and they work together. They learn from each other, they conspire, they inspire. And so that's a huge piece of what we do, is that global aspect that we started with the exchange and that we continue.
One thing that really strikes me actually is how, and it's something I've seen in other projects, other people I've been speaking to, is I suppose how technology has removed the gatekeepers for girls. So I think previously it's been very hard for girls to connect with other girls in other parts of the world without lots of control over how that happens, who can do it, like you say, and obviously there's still a lot of barriers there. But I think there's something so powerful about the way that technology can cross those divides and build these kind of communities where I suppose girls from all different contexts are talking and realizing that actually they want things to be different and they're not alone in that. And I think there's real power in that. And when you talk about Global Girl Project, I think that seems to be at the heart, is this community, this kind of diverse community of girls who are connecting through the project in a way that they couldn't do otherwise. And actually through that connection, they're finding their power. And I suppose that seems to be the real innovation.
You hit the nail on the head. For me, it's this understanding that we are all connected. And this is what I said at the beginning, right? That we are all connected, and that connection is power. And the powers that be would like us to think that we're not connected and that we're not the same, because it's much easier to control people who feel isolated and alone. But our girls, want to connect. They want to understand how girls in other parts of the world are living and see themselves in those girls. And there's so much power because our girls are very isolated for various reasons, including the fact that many of them are living within communities that still kind of very much have singular roles for them, which is, married and children. And they want different things in addition to that. And so that is the power. And that's why our girls keep asking for more and keep coming back and keep reaching out, because they need that connection.
I think it's the difference, isn't it, between being the only person in a small community that thinks differently to everybody that you know, versus recognizing that actually you're one of thousands of people in the global community that thinks differently. I suppose it's that difference, and I have seen that as a common theme, this idea that through technology you find out that you're not alone.
Yeah.
In your difference. I suppose actually perhaps your difference is not as different as you thought in a bigger community.
Yeah. And that your difference is powerful, that it's actually to be celebrated. And I'm somebody who has been quite different in my life growing up. I was the only woman of color. Well, there's probably like 5 of us in the community I grew up in. I ended up, figuring out a bit later in life that I was gay as well, and really never fit in. And so for me, it was actually a strength, because it meant that the rules didn't apply and I could do whatever I wanted, right? Because the rules applied to all of these straight, white friends that I had that didn't apply to me. This was like the 80s and the 90s, right?
Yeah,
so it's a bit different now. But yeah, it is kind of, then I think in developing Global Girl, I knew that there was a power in knowing that even if you want to live yourself outside the box, there are other people around the world who do too. And that we have to have those. We need our tribe. If we don't have our tribe, it's too hard. For most of us, it's too difficult. So we're creating that tribe, that community of, of change makers that happen to be girls, our most marginalized girls in the world, I think, in a lot of ways. So yeah, that's us.
Amazing. So I'm going to get a bit more philosophical now. So I wanted to kind of ask you, I know that you've described, when we've talked before, the Global Girl Project as a feminist organization, and I wanted to kind of unpack what that means to you. Like, what does it mean to be a feminist organization and to be a feminist leader in that organization?
For me, it's about valuing feminine qualities equally to masculine qualities. I think in business, and this isn't about men and women, this is about masculine and feminine. And I do believe that we, in nature are looking for balance. And part of that balance is between the masculine and feminine. And I think we in business and in a lot of society, we're still very unbalanced in that we value masculine qualities much more than we do feminine qualities. And I don't think it's served us very well so far, so I think it's one of the biggest things that we value is collaboration. I believe intrinsically in the power of collaboration over competition. That we're much stronger when we work together than we are by pushing other people down and trying to get to the top. There's no value in competing, to me. So that means it expresses itself in our ability to work in partnership, and it's a true partnership. It's not imbalanced as far as, the feedback that we receive and how we're experiencing it. It means that we're continually looking at ourselves, continually questioning ourselves and assessing ourselves, and how can we do better, and where are we not doing enough, and where do we need to be challenged? I think we need to have a very feminine quality, is kind of like being open to being challenged, not seeing it as a sort of a attack on one's ego, but just kind of understanding that we're all here to continue to grow and be better versions of ourselves. I think that it's also looking at how we work less in a top-down sort of hierarchical manner, that there's opportunity for leadership for everybody within an organization, not just who one would consider to be the boss. I'm the boss because I founded the organization, but that's not really how I work, right? I really believe that each of the people who work with us, if they have their own agency and power over their work and that connection, then they'll be much happier and do much better work. And so I want everybody to have opportunity to lead. I think also valuing we just implemented a 32-hour work week, is a perfect example of that. I want people that work with us who have full, passionate, exciting lives that are important to them. And so I want them to have time for that and time to take care of themselves, so that when they come to work, they're excited and they're ready and they feel valued and they feel heard and understood. And that's really, really important.
So I'm going to shift us on slightly just to think more about, so we talked about a bit about what we think feminism means and feminist leadership. And I know leadership is obviously right at the heart of everything you do. And it's the thing that I suppose you're really trying to support girls to find within themselves. Like you've talked a lot about power, a lot about leadership. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about, I suppose, that journey that you described taking or going on, kind of embarking on with your girls. And like, what is their understanding of leadership and power when they first start and join your community? And then how does that change over time as they connect with other girls, as they, I suppose, spend more time in this community that you're creating?
Yeah. It's another good question, because it's, the learning that I've had over the years is, the word leader, again, can have quite a lot of negative connotations, especially in the places that we work. Many of our girls, from what they tell us, when they think of a leader, they think of often politicians, and almost 100% corrupt politicians, and always men. And so if one thinks of a leader in that way, then why would you inspire to be one, right? And also, and as a girl too, like that, it's so far away. Like, unless you want to be a corrupt politician, then why would you think of leading? And so, and then power is then wrapped all up in that. We think that power is something that leaders have, and we think that power is something negative and used to control, and to put one above the other, and so and that is in most of the world how power is used, right? We're seeing it happen right now in Ukraine, and we know that that's how it's used. However, if we look at kind of I'd say a feminist alternative to leadership and power, a lot of the work that we're doing with the girls is helping them to redefine what it means to be a leader. And for them, in the process of that, they don't know that's what they've signed up for, but in the process of it, they realize that they are leaders. And so a lot of the work is done around teaching them about large scale change and then small scale change, and helping them to see that all large scale change is actually just a lot of small scale change happening that comes to large scale change, and then helping them to identify through examples that we may provide, and we ask our facilitators to provide as well, ways that they can actually take steps, attributes that they have already within themselves that actually make them leaders. And so in the process, they start to understand, what a true leader is. And for me, that's, it's somebody who really who's invested in everyone around them connecting to their own power, and their own leadership, and, really leading from behind and sort of underneath almost, right? Like that's a true leader. It's not from the front telling people what to do. And so, I think we're an example of that to our girls and how we work, but that's a lot of what we teach them. And there is a moment where you can see it change. I think it's usually after session 4, I think, it's like 11 sessions, the blended learning. And they realize that, and all the facilitators, because they do feedback forums every week, and they're like, the girls are actually starting to recognize that they are leaders. And then we start to teach them tools to actually implement something that will show them that they are leaders. And so by the end of it, I can't remember the percentage, something like 93 or 97% of our graduates, are now wanting to do more within their communities, and see themselves as action takers as opposed to passive sort of victims of what is happening in their communities. And then I guess it's also reconceptualizing power. You know, power is something that's positive. Like what, to me, a power is like an authentic power is something that somebody has within them that nobody can take away. And that isn't connected to your ego. You know, it's not about how good you are, right? It's really almost about like, how good does everybody feel around you, you know? And what we teach the girls is like, you have to use your power and your opportunity to create change for others. You know, I, as a person, believe very much that we're all here to be of service to each other. And that if we're not here helping each other, then what are we doing? You know, that's just me. That's probably why I'm a social worker, but you know, other people might have other ideas, but, that's what I think. And so the girls, you know, the girls also see that and they agree. And so then that's their power, is in helping other people, and within that helping themselves. And so for me, that's kind of like helping them to really reconceptualize power. What is authentic power? What is real power? And it being something that's positive and not something that's used to control, which is what we usually see now.
Yeah, and I think so. What really strikes me again is so I've done a lot of leadership training that I've hated in my life, as many.
Haven't we all?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I love is that it's about what you're saying is this idea that you realize you are a leader rather than it being something that you become, that you're not quite there yet, but if you just were a bit more confident or you learned this technique to be heard more clearly, like you would become a leader. And like, I love it being the opposite of that actually really it's about, in this alternative kind of paradigm, it's about realizing that you already are a leader because you already have this, like you talk about this authentic power. You already have that, and it's not something that anyone can give you or take away. And so you actually, leadership is not something that you're going to work really hard and get to eventually. You're it already. And I think that's such a powerful realization, and it's so different to so much of the leadership training that we would experience, I think, in the West. Like I think in certainly in my experience in a professional context, like it's an antithesis of that in many ways. But it's such a powerful message, and I think it's obviously critical for the people you're working with, because actually I suppose those that model of leadership excludes them. Like there's no space for their kind of leadership in those models, and actually this offers a way for more people to lead, more diverse people to lead, and also for you to get involved straight away. So you don't need to have, you don't need to wait until you've got this qualification or that qualification. It's an open space rather than a ladder, I suppose.
Absolutely.
I love that idea.
We need to get you to do our marketing, Emily.
I get told that quite a lot, actually.
Really? That doesn't surprise me. I'm like, yes, you've just brought that all together in a way that I don't even know that I could do in the same way. And I created the program. I mean, you're right, because for our girls, for the most part, unfortunately, in their lifetimes, they're probably not going to have the opportunities that are going to allow them to lead in the way that we think leadership is, right? And so then they would never get started. And I do believe we can always be better leaders. We can always be stronger. We can always challenge ourselves. But we all have it within us, and I spent a lot of time in my childhood not knowing that, and having people around me who probably did know and didn't want me to be powerful. And so it took me a long time to connect with my power. And now when I look back, I realize that I've always been this powerful. And it just, people didn't have anybody to support that. And so, it is that piece, and it's so important. And when you see them realize that, it's just, it's in a moment, and then they can't get enough. They want more. And they was like, how do I continue to use this? How do I continue to get better at it and to get stronger? And we're on the beginning of that journey with them. But yeah, very well said. Total genius.
But yeah, no, and I suppose it's the only way to create change, isn't it? Because if we're saying that the current leadership our current approach and understanding of leadership is actually the problem. It's the root of exclusion for a lot of people. So actually, until we change that, we're not going to really solve a lot of the problems that we want to solve. And so actually, by redefining power and leadership, that's kind of how you're changing the world, really. And it's such a fundamental change that it's so easy to overlook. It's so easy to be like, okay, let's focus on, I don't know, this particular kind of poverty or this particular issue, without recognizing that actually what's driving a lot of these issues is the fact that our fundamental understanding of leadership and power is I suppose driving exclusion of particular groups. And actually, if they can take that power back, a lot of these problems they would solve because they understand them, they affect them, and they know what's needed in, like you say, in their community to change that. Basically, we've solved many problems in theory.
In theory, now we just need to get everybody to do it. So that's a whole other story. But
but I just wanted to wrap up really. And again, I've been asking these 2 questions to everybody, and I just wondered if you could summarize what it means to you to lead like a feminist, just in a couple of sentences, kind of based on what everything we've discussed. What does it mean?
What does it mean? For me, it means connection. It means you have to connect. You have to connect to yourself and then therefore connect to others. It means vulnerability. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. And the truest sense of being vulnerable, not vulnerable until we're uncomfortable, but vulnerable past being really uncomfortable. And well, growth and collaboration. Those for me are those sort of core principles of feminist leadership.
And I think a lot of people, they want to really change the status quo. They really feel very frustrated with the injustices that they encounter, and they also are kind of on this journey to try and do things differently. But I think, as you've said, it can be really tough. It's not an easy road. And I just wondered what are your kind of practical tips and advice for people who are on that journey, kind of based on your experiences. Over your life, but also in going through this process of really building this kind of global community.
I think that one of the things that I've really realized is that you have to be willing to be very uncomfortable and unbalanced. And I don't remember what I was listening to or watching. There's sort of this idea of like, we often feel unbalanced in life. You're standing with one leg up in the air. And what we very quickly want to do is put the other leg down. And my challenge to people is to say, don't put that leg down.
I wanna be the change. I wanna be the change. Oh, yeah, when I show, yeah, I wanna be the change. Oh, yeah, when I show, yeah.
Okay, so now we're on to our podcast postmortem. So Marlene, I wanted to ask you a bit about this idea of connection that Julia spoke about, because she talked about this kind of connection that that makes you very vulnerable, that is really uncomfortable. And I was just thinking about how difficult it is to form those kind of connections. And I wondered if you had any kind of experiences of forming, I suppose, uncomfortable connections, perhaps across divides, and how that felt and what you learned from it.
Let me first of all say that forming genuine connections is quite a challenge, because at the end of the day, when we have to deal with people's egos to begin with, it's very hard for you to know how they're going to respond or react, especially when you're trying to challenge some of their ideologies. Especially, let's talk about mental health, that I work in so many spaces. You find that when it comes to creatives, there are different kinds of creatives. There is the well-known creatives, and there is these other ones who are really trying to go up the food chain. So you find that at the top of the food chain, there is these people who feel that they know it all, because I've reached this point because I was able to tackle a lot. And you find that at the end of the day, you have to become a very honest person. You have to be very vulnerable. You have to show them that you've been there and you understand. So it's more about being honest. First, you have to be honest with yourself, and that is something that most people forget. So for you to form genuine connections, as we call them, you have to be authentic. You have to be yourself. You have to first know your weaknesses as a person so that you can be able to be vulnerable with others. Because if you always feel that you're perfect, it will be very hard for you to form genuine connections with others, because you'll find that at the end of the day, you're just trying to form an argument where you win. While at the end of the day, it's not always about winning, but it's more about coming into an understanding with the people you're kind of challenging anything with. Feminist leaders are vulnerable with their teams, and their teams are able to understand this is our contribution. And from time to time, we are all human. So I will have to pick up Emily's 30% and give it a 70%. And there is a time that Emily will bring the 70% while I am at 30% myself. So at the end of the day, that picking up people is what, or meeting them halfway is what builds genuine connections.
And I guess, how do we do that in with people where there is really strong disagreement, or where there is a different ideology? Because I think often you want to just go away from that, kind of shut off from it. And I guess as feminist leaders, we probably need to try and engage and connect with people that do have very different perspectives. And I guess I find that really hard. I don't know about you.
I think that is where I formed the ideology of agreeing to disagree and disagreeing to agree. Because at the end of the day, when you're purpose focused, or when you have a very genuine focus on an ideology, at the end of the day, you tend to want to understand it from other people's perspectives. And I think that is where sometimes we have to take a step back and listen. So I think communication is one of the most important things. And that is something that I learned over time. Sometimes you don't always have to be right. So you have to take a step back and see how you can be able to tackle the issue from their perspective. So sometimes as a leader, I also go to the ground, and I find that people are in so much disagreement. And I have to find a way of listening to both of them and trying to tell them that, at the end of the day, it's like you still want the same results, but you just have a different perspective on how it should be handled. So what about we combine your idea and his idea and her idea, and now we see how we can be able to be in unison. So I think that is what I personally do, trying to agree to disagree, and at the end of the day, you're trying to use everyone's ideas to the advantage of the main ideology.
And I think there's something around, I suppose, like I think Paki Wedi talked about in our first podcast about active listening. And I think I've done quite a lot of political campaigning over the last 12 months. And I think when you go out into the community and talk to people, it's about not just listening to what they say, but trying to listen to what they feel, if that makes sense. Because often what people say is just an indicator of a much deeper feeling. So they might say, oh, I'm really cross about this particular thing that somebody has done. But actually, I suppose underneath that is a deeper sense of hurt and betrayal, or something deeper. And actually, if you can work out what the deeper feeling is beneath what they're saying, you can form a more genuine connection. So instead of trying to argue about why the decision was right, you can acknowledge their feeling and say, I'm sorry that you're so frustrated, or it's really awful that you feel so frustrated about that. And I think trying to get beneath the words to how people feel and form connections around that can actually also help with this idea of kind of, I suppose, forming connection and I suppose turning a disagreement, what would be a disagreement if you were just thinking about the ideas, into a connection around shared feeling. So I think that's something that I've observed.
Wow. Quite
Anyway, I think that's probably it for this week. As always, thanks, Molly. That was really interesting.
Thank you too, Emily.
Yeah, I wanna be the change. I wanna be the change. Oh, yeah, when I show, yeah.
If you like what you heard today, remember to subscribe to the Lead Like a Feminist podcast for information on new releases, and please do share with your family, friends and social networks. You can also interact with us directly on social media on LinkedIn, Twitter or Instagram, or get in touch at leadlikeafeminist@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on today's podcast. And finally, we'd like to say a massive thank you to Afrocolour Arts for helping to produce the podcast, and to the amazing Sherry Owasi for letting us use her track Be The Change. Do check out her full album Queendom on Spotify. It's pretty awesome. And also finally to Chelsea Madison for all her help with our social media. More from us next time, and in the meantime, keep on changing the status quo.